The process to create a short project using ProShow Gold, some basic options. After you open the program, you're going to see two boxes over here, the folder list and the file list. I'm going to identify the desktop as the place I'm going to create a folder, and then from that folder I'm going to take all the images from the camera that I want to make a movie from, or however I get my images, and put them in that folder on the desktop. Now once I have that folder on the desktop created, if I click desktop and then click on that folder that I'll see, I can see all the images that have been placed there. Now it's a good idea to organize those images and rename them before you get started at this step, so that you have something to work with and you have an idea of what the order is going to be for what you're doing. I'm going to make a very small project. It's going to be 3 slides long. So I'm going to click on the first slide, and I've already identified these as being the first 3 slides. I've got ones next to the names that I've given them, so they're all coming up in order that way. Now once I have those 3 slides selected by clicking on the first slide, holding a shift key, and clicking on the last slide I want, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on those 3 and drop them down onto the timeline. Now I have the 3 images that I want to make my short movie from. What I'd like to do with those images, though, is I'd like to randomize the motion effects and the pan and the zoom and the rotate, so that they're going to be a little more interesting to look at than simply pictures. So I'm going to click on my first picture. I'm going to hold the shift key when I'm on the timeline. I'm going to click on my last picture. And now what I'm going to do is right-click on any of those pictures, click Randomize, and then select Randomize Motion Effects, and then select All Effects. Now when I do that, it's not going to play like a slideshow. It's going to be a slideshow, but it's going to have a slight effect to it. I'd like to do something else. I'd like to make these a lot shorter. You notice that the time for each slide is 3 seconds, and the transition time for each slide is 3 seconds as well. I'm going to click on that first slide. I'm going to give it a 2-second transition. Now if I make all of my slides selected at once, if I click all of them and I click and make that 2 seconds, hit the enter key, and then I make this 1 second for the transition, notice what that does. All of my slides now have that same 1 second transition and 2-second slide time for each slide. So if I click on my first slide and I click play, notice I'll get the random effects, and I'll also see that the slide timings are the same for each of the slides. Another thing I can do is I can manually change how that slide will look. Sometimes you might get a head cut off or something else happen when you randomize the effects. So if I double click on a slide, and then when I double click on the slide, if I go over here to layers and I click on that image in the layers option on the left hand side, and then I click effects, what I can do with that is I can take and I now can select, if I'm noticing the arrows showing me this where the start is, I can say this is where I want the image to start. And then over here, if I click on that, I can say, well, I want that to stop like that. So I could also rotate or horizontal tilt. I can have all sorts of effects I can put on this just to make it a little more interesting. When I click OK, when I click play right now, I'll see that show again. But now that second slide has gotten that effect that I've given it. And it's good to every so often do something special to a slide just to make it a little more interesting to watch. Once I've done that, the next thing I'm interested in doing is I'm interested in saving this project. So I'm going to click on File and Save As. And again, I'm going to go to my desktop. And I'm going to call this slide 1 the campsite, this slideshow 1 the campsite. And I'll click Save. So now I've created a show, added some effects, and I've saved my project.